Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube for Pigs Round 14 Captaincy Recommendations. My captaincy recommendations have been flying lately, and last week was no exception. I had Tim English's 127, Cherry's 153, Gawn's 131, Butter's 143, TDK's 146, amongst some of the top options that I recommended for you. And I recommended Brodie Grundy's 155 for my pod captain, which turned out to be the highest scorer of the round. So let's keep that form going this week. For me personally, I saved my VC for Tristan Xerri, as I recommended everyone do, and I was very happy with his 153. To me, that was just one of the easiest picks of the year. This week is another week with teams on the bye, so we all should have blue dot loopholes. And while the options aren't quite as juicy as last week, there are still plenty of good projections for round 14. So let's get stuck in. There are some fun options on the Thursday night game for you to consider. There's the classic Rowan Marshall versus Tim English ruck battle, which usually ends with both of them scoring well. There's the Jack McRae revenge game 2.0. But one of the funnest VCs in the game surely has to be Bailey Dale, a guy who's already shown a 140 plus ceiling twice this year, and he's shown the ability to score 100 points in a half of footy like he did in one of those games against the Bombers. He had a down game against the Cats 2 weeks ago, but despite that, he's still got a 5-round average of 119. And now a date with St Kilda, who are giving up plenty of points to both general and attacking defenders. We've seen guys like Joel Jeffrey, Stephen May, John Noble and Liam Duggan all score well against St Kilda recently. However, they have restricted some of those running types like Salem, Rioli and Sard. Look, I wouldn't worry too much about that with a VC. The VC is best used on someone that can give you a spike score. And Bailey Dale against St Kilda at Marvel is exactly someone who could do that. Speaking of spike scores against St Kilda, the Bont is always an option. His first game of the season this year was round 6 against St Kilda, in which he ripped a 159. He didn't look like he'd missed a beat. He has slowed down a bit since then, but we know he loves this matchup. 2 scores of 125 were his last 2 meetings with them before that 159. Now, St Kilda are actually the 5th most restrictive matchup for inside mids this season, so they are a bit tough, and no one has even cracked 125 against St Kilda in the last 5 weeks. However, this is Marcus Bontempelli we're speaking about, the best Supercoach midfielder in the league. He plays on a Thursday night, and I would never recommend people ignore that as an option. Best case scenario, he gives you a huge VC score to set up your weekend. Worst case is he fails and you move on to a safe captaincy option. It's not an issue. Maxi Holmes. Last week I had Bailey Smith in my top 3 recommendations due to the easy matchup against the Suns at home. And then when Bailey was laid out, I encouraged some people in the Dr. Supercoach Slack to consider a Max Holmes VC. And boy oh boy did he deliver. A season high 152 from 40 disposals, 6 marks, 5 tackles. What a game. Well, this week he gets another positive matchup against Essendon. The Bombers are a positive matchup for inside midfielders. They're the 6th easiest in the league. But what really excites me here is that they are giving up the most points in the league to wingmen and attacking defenders. So these guys that run all day, spread around the ground for marks and disposals. I mean, imagine being Max Holmes and being matched up with Will Setterfield or Darcy Parish. You know they aren't going to be able to keep up with you. This one's going to be a picnic for Max, and the wide open spaces of the MCG should give him plenty of room to roam. But I just talked about how Essendon are the easiest team for hard-running wingmen to score against, and Max Holmes might be one of the best runners in the league, but his competition for that title might actually come from his own teammate. Bailey Smith is one of the best aerobic athletes we've seen in a long time, and he should also take advantage of the plodding Essendon midfield. I just had a vision of Will Setterfield blowing up trying to chase Baz from fullback to full forward. Even just last week, Essendon allowed Ollie Hollands to have a 122, Blake Acres to have a 110, and Sam Dockey to have a 107. So they are giving up plenty of points to those guys that can just run. And none of those guys are near Bailey Smith's level, let's be honest. Baz Lenker is averaging 134 Supercoach points across his last 5 games. He's already showed us a ceiling of 147 3 times this year from his 11 games. This matchup gets me excited as a Supercoach owner. It's matchups like these where the stars align that can lead to huge spike scores. Prior to last week, my pod captaincy's had a 3-round average of 132. Well, Brodie Grundy did me proud with the highest score of round 13, smashing out a big 155. So the pod Cs are on fire. Let's keep the ball rolling with a player owned by only 6% of teams. George Hewett has flown under the radar this season, despite averaging 115. He had a 5-round patch at the start of the year where he scored 123, 126, 125, 132 and 171. That was good for a 5-round average of 135, and people still weren't talking about him. And outside of a poor 64 against the Giants just before his bye, George hasn't sub-ton since round 1. Now he gets a matchup with West Coast, who he has already cooked for a 132 in gather round. The Eagles are the 5th easiest midfield to score against this year, having slightly tightened up lately, but I can't imagine it'll be enough to slow down Hewett. And even though the data shows them as the 5th easiest, West Coast still have given up scores like a 137 to Sheasel, 129 to Bailey Smith, 138 to Jordan Dawson, and that's just in the past 3 weeks. This is the perfect captaincy choice for owners. This is a super safe, super consistent scorer against one of the easiest teams in the league. And he does have the potential for a spike score if things go well. Now moving on to captains. I've talked a lot in recent weeks about how many disposals and marks around the backline that the Demons are giving up to their opposing defenders. And we've seen that translate to some big scores, including a 155 to Jeremy Howe, a 122 to Josh Dacos, and a 150 to Cal Wilkie in the last fortnight. Well, Connor Rozee is the general of Port Adelaide's backline this year, and he just had 28 disposals and 7 marks against a fairly restrictive GWS. In that game, he even managed to sneak forward and hit the scoreboard 4 times. Since Rozee has moved to the backline, he has teased us a bit. He's averaging 109, which is really good, but he's not putting up any big scores on the board since that big one he had in gather round. But I think this could finally be the week where he punishes non-owners and puts together a real captaincy-worthy performance, especially given Melbourne's leakiness to opposing defenders. Now, number 4, Tristan Xerri. A 5-round average of 152. 5 round. What an absolute weapon the X-Man is. This week he matches up with Fremantle, who are the 6th easiest ruck matchup in the league. They did limit Jared Witts in their last game, but prior to that they allowed a 117 to Briggs, a 113 to Decam, 112 to Marshall and a 117 to Gawn. So they're not massive numbers to be sure, but they're still solid captaincy scores, especially when you add in the fact that Xerri is better than most guys, so you could probably add a few points to that. Freo have been mixing up their ruck line a little bit recently. They've actually been lowering Sean Darcy's ruck time to give Luke Jackson more opportunities. Last game before their bye, they were actually an exact 50-50 split on ruck contests attended. So if that continues, it is good signs for Xerri, as Jackson is one of the easiest ruckmen in the league to win a hit out against, compared to Darcy, who's actually quite restrictive when fully fit, which I don't think he is. It's hard to know what the Dockers run with this week, but either way, I still expect Xerri to put up a really safe 125 or more and be a brilliant captaincy option for everyone. I don't think this is going to be a monster 152 like he's averaging in his last 5, but a safety net, absolutely. And it actually feels kind of weird having Xerri this low at number 4 just because he's been so dominant, but that's just how hot I am on the next 3. Brayshaw is coming off the bye fresh, straight into the easiest matchup of the year for an inside midfielder. North Melbourne have recently allowed scores of 119 from Liam Baker, 134 from Ned Long, 126 from Jack Cripps, 139 from Josh Dunkley, 120 from Hugh McCluggage, and that 172 from Zach Merritt. And in that time, they haven't shown any inkling towards tagging. Brayshaw running free without a tag is always a scary sight for non-owners, and fresh off a rest, this could be doubly so this week. He has shown us 3 times this season already that he's got 150 plus in him, and we're talking about a season average of 122. This is one of the best midfielders in the game against the easiest midfield in the comp that have shown no indication of tagging, so I really think this could be another big one. Number 2 is Tom Koning. TDK returned from his bye last week and he pumped a monster 156 on Todd Goldstein. And for reference, Goldstein is the 3rd easiest ruck matchup in the league. But Matt Flynn is the easiest, and that is TDK's opponent this week. This is a guy who's recently given up scores of 153 to Xerri, 161 to O'Brien, 179 to Marshall, 198 to Gawn, and 161 to Meek. Those are ridiculous numbers. And remember, TDK himself scored a 118 against them earlier in the year in brutally hot, tough conditions. Like, he didn't look himself that game. I remember us all commenting he looked average, and he still managed a 118. Let's remember that. What is he going to do in a cooler atmosphere, having had a rest only 2 weeks ago? I think he puts that 118 to shame, and he does what we all expected him to do in their last meeting. But number one, Max Gawn. This is so hard to write and read about as a non-owner all year, but he just keeps getting it done, and he keeps making more captaincy videos. Big Maxi, like I said, he just keeps getting it done. He's still the highest scorer in SuperCoach this season, at least until his bye. He's got a 5-round average of 131, and now a matchup with his absolute bunny team. His last 2 meetings with Port have led to scores of 177 and 177. That is right, 177 twice in a row against Port last year. Now, those games were against Jordan Sweet and Ivan Soldo, respectively, and the Power have been using Dante Visentini as their ruckman this year. But honestly, Visentini, since he's come into the side, he's been one of the easiest ruckmen in the league to score against this season. Like, he's up there with Matt Flynn in terms of conceding points. So I don't think it really matters who Port roll out here. We've just seen Dante give up a 81 to the debutant, Nicholas Madden. Just before that, he gave up a 163 to Luke Jackson, a 129 to Mark Blitzarves. What are you doing? And 100 to Riley O'Brien. And before Jordan Sweet got dropped, he gave up that monster 166 to Tim English. So long story short, Port Adelaide do not have anyone that can stop Max Gawn in this game. And unfortunately for us non-owners, this could be another monster score on our head. And here's my number one option this week. And I think all owners should be going with Max Gawn. So there we go. Those are my top 10 captain options this week. As always, here's some more names that didn't make the cut. There are probably less than other weeks just because the matchups aren't quite as juicy and we have another 4 teams on the bye. But especially for draft, like I think Carl Amon could do well out the back, so Adelaide have been giving up a fair bit to designated kickers, so maybe it's someone like him. Riley O'Brien, I think, should do well against Meekie. Reece Stanley or whoever Geelong roll out as their ruck, like Goldstein's been giving it up, so they could score well. Quite interested in some of the North boys because Freo have been giving it up a bit to mid, so whoever runs through there, maybe it's Sheasel, maybe it's LDU. But also the defenders, they've been giving up a lot of points to these designated kickers. So Caleb Daniel or Colby McKercher moved back there last week and he looked incredible. So maybe you could even captain one of those guys. I've just talked about how Andrew Brayshaw is such a lock. I mean, Caleb Sarong is in the same boat. I think, especially for draft, he's a really, really good option. Stephen May has been in red-hot form. He's killing it lately. He's been actually my draft captain in a couple of these last weeks. And Porter giving it up to those kind of wingman attacking defenders and designated kickers, so he's an option. Look, I talked about how George Hewett is going to rip West Coast here, but if you own Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh or Adam Chera, no reason they can't do the same in draft. Even Sam Doherty, maybe off the back line in his new role moving back to defence, he potentially could be an option too. But as you have probably guessed from my video, I think I'm really keen on Bailey Smith against Essendon. I think that's just a perfect matchup. It's just an elite runner against a team that just are slow and cannot stop elite runners. So I'm probably going to VC him. It does feel weird not to go to Xerri, so maybe I'll have Xerri as my backup captain. But I also really like Tom de Koning, so I think I'll have a punter to Bailey Smith VC, and then I'll decide which of those ruckmen I have as my backup. But anyway, thanks for watching. Good luck this weekend.